about to go to Jonathan?
You mentioned that you wanted to take veganism from being an anti this or that to being a positive. Are you advocating changing the definition of it?
Can you? No, yeah. There's one.
How would I say it? I don't know about changing the definition, as if I even know what that definition that we're changing from is static at all or stable at all. I think what I was pointing to more is that we have numerous strategies, tactics, tools at our disposal and ought employ. And veganism as just a descriptive word to mean one's exclusionary behavior is one of those tactics. And it's an inflexible tactic, especially for animal liberation, but it's just a tactic. Or in short, veganism, the ism refers to conduct, it doesn't refer to ideology. So veganism is not about anything. It is something, and it's something we do. But then we'd have to then get, and if you said, well, okay, you practice veganism or you're a vegan, what is the basis for that? And then one could get into a whole long conversation of multiple reasons, multiple sites of resistance that they use veganism in service of.
Questions?
In some ways, asking somebody to become a vegan is a fairly simple ask. Like, it's established in our society at this point what being vegan is and what it is to follow those behaviors. But asking somebody to do those positive behaviors is a much more complex ask that requires like constant work to be a good person. So how do you mitigate the fact that it's just harder to ask someone to do that?
I mean, I think I agree with you, especially because we have this almost intuition, or maybe it's been schooled that negative duties are unbelievably more stronger than positive duties, that our duty not to kill is somehow unbelievably stronger than our duty to save, that somehow I have a duty not to kill a small child, but if there's a small child drowning in a puddle, the duty to save that child is actually somehow much less. We could discuss whether they're the same, but they seem to me much closer than anyone typically intuits. But I think the beauty of what you asked is you're absolutely right. But what it does is then it makes the exclusionary behavior of veganism almost like it's what we should be doing, obviously. You know what I mean? If we start to make positive duties things that we should already be actively engaged in, which are a little bit harder, such as rescuing animals and taking care of them on a daily basis, then veganism as exclusion is a no-brainer. I mean, but what we typically do is kind of feed into that vegan, kind of in vegan advocacy circles, which I think is much different than animal liberation advocacy or total liberation advocacy, where in order to quote-unquote meet people where we are, we buy into this idea that veganism is really hard. Yeah, I know it's really hard, so just a little bit. Now, it might be really hard for certain people living in places we encountered before, like in British Columbia and so on. But for most people who activists are talking to, I think the minute we show how actually those positive duties are also required and maybe a little bit more difficult, not only do we plant the seed of people maybe starting sanctuaries and doing those positive duties, but then hopefully they realize that their veganism is something that should start that very minute.
This is a question for Mark. You mentioned, some of the difficulty of like being a student here or doing some of the work that you do on campus. And you also said you're going to be hopefully starting law school soon. Yeah, I guess I was thinking in my own situation, being in a pretty traditional PhD program, pretty like rigid and hierarchical. Just like how do you plan to approach that going into law, which is like often a pretty rigid study? And how do you plan to continue this sort of work in law?
Yeah, that's a great question.
there's not very many anarchist lawyers out there. But they do actually exist, and I work for a really cool law firm in town. I'm a legal assistant, and they actually put me on to a couple anarchist lawyers that they know from around the world, which is pretty cool. But I think, unfortunately, I've had this discussion with Nocella so many times, and I guess just other people who work for any type of institution. Really, it's difficult to kind of keep this like foundation of our framework of anarchism and anti-capitalism, just in general, in your work when you're part of an institution. Like, how the hell does that work? So it's a good question, and I guess the answer I can't really give you right now because I'm not doing it yet, but I assume that if you want to break something, you have to get up inside of it, so just leave it at that, I guess.
Question for Jonathan. So one thing that we've talked about a little bit is just kind of the extent of the positive duties and where that ends. Something that I've noticed in the sanctuary world is that there are a relatively small number of people doing a lot of rescuing, and it would be pretty great if that rescuing and caretaking of animals and those other positive duties could be more spread out so that everyone was taking on just a little bit. So I suppose, how do you balance that whole thing about encouraging people to rescue, but also not having them rescue to the point where each animal is not able to receive quality care?
I mean, that's a great question. I would not have it. I think we're so far from that, meaning people rescuing at all, to the point of there's a few people out there rescuing to the point where it becomes an issue. But I think that there are situations in which we'll have to balance their well-being vis-a-vis their imminent death, right? So what is the hit to well-being of rescued animals? Rescuing a lot, but then if you don't rescue them, the imminent death they'll suffer, say, in shelters or in industry. But I would say I think we completely underestimate our positive duties, like I said a moment ago, and the fact that individuals, most of us, view rescuing animals as a burden. I will have to sacrifice my ability to, say, consume as I like, or travel as I like, or do these other things based on the fact that now I'm saving individuals. I know those that have saved and caretake don't feel that way, obviously, after a while. But I think it reaches deep into a society of consumerism, of leisure time, of a complete underestimation of our duties to others, of a complete erasure of values of mutual aid that, I mean, they're right there in front of us. These animals are waiting to be saved, they're going to be killed. And so I think once we can start to do rescues, not of just the kind of commonplace pets and companions, then we can start to dive into those more difficult questions of what happens when it starts to hit on well-being as well.
We have a little bit more time, and Johnny's on the phone, so maybe a question for Johnny, if you have one, just to be equitable and to respect Johnny's work.
I have a question for Mari. You mentioned that like the big city capitalism is kind of like toxic to the entire system, and that coming out here, like I guess we get it here, that being out here. So what's your kind of solution if people want to stay in that toxic environment, and like kind of detoxify it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Again, I think so much of my struggle in doing this work is like, I don't actually have the answers for a lot of things. But I think that's the beauty of like anarchism and the framework of anti-capitalism is like mutual aid and like coming together and recognizing that like I don't have all the answers. I don't actually know anything, you know. But I guess my assumption for that would be kind of along the same lines as what I was talking about with Max just a second ago, and then I didn't actually get to articulate, but like using your title in a way that helps So like, even though there are hierarchies and you have to be a part of a hierarchy, like, using that to like do something about it. Like, you get, what is the word? You get kind of this like respect when you say that you're somebody, right? Like, I have a PhD, or like I have a whatever, like, oh cool. So automatically you get cultural capital, right? So like, in a space where obviously there's so many, like, capitalism is thriving, I guess you could say. Capitalism thrives everywhere. But in big cities, like we're talking about, if you have that title and you are respected, use your platform, I guess, and speak out against what you're seeing. I mean, just, yeah, having the conversation about how distant, like I was saying in my presentation, how far you are away from your food, how far you are away from recognizing, like, this land actually does not belong to you. This land belongs to Native people. And yeah, that kind of stuff.
All right, so I'll ask one quick question, and Johnny can plug his work, just to respect him. Johnny, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah, Matt.
Okay, great.
Right on.
This is Anthony. Just when it comes to eco-ability, and then some of the students that you have, what is some of the work that you're working on, or wish people were working on, that you see are gaps when we come to what Jonathan talks about, and I think you all three were talking about, is total liberation. So what are some gaps that we need to start filling?
Yeah, I heard it. I think echo, so I'm just going to keep speaking. Whoever was just talking to the fact of mutual aid and leveraging positions of power within the social hierarchies of Western industrial civilization, like a PhD, or say if somebody's a teacher. One of the things I think that I'm working on, a lot of students and a lot of colleagues and comrades out on the ground, is just decolonize schools, and I mean like literally deschooling in an anarchist sense. To look at, what ways, and that's kind of what I was getting at in that paper and chapter, is how can we reimagine together with mutual aid centers and ecological systems? How can we reimagine what school is, how we learn, teach, and learn? So most of schooling, we know, is set up in Western industrial capitalism. And so right down to the fact that we emphasize individuals as an entity that's a total false understanding of who we are, and it doesn't highlight our capacity for mutual aid. In fact, it's more conducive for us to compete with one another in a way that undermines the kind of anarchist vision of total liberation or community in a mutual aid sense. So one real practical way I'm working on just leaving today, was from radicalizing the school board, like really making sure that, in an inclusive way, we're able to keep more voices in that even of the environment as represented on our local school boards, and so that have a say in how schools are imagined here. And that takes a tremendous amount of leveraging positions of power or cultural capital, because as we know, those kinds of spaces are highly exclusive and regulatory. So, getting in there with PhDs in education and with teachers and with parents, it's really important to kind of look into where are there indigenous and anarchist models of schools that we can follow. And so I think that's a real practical way that in the eco-ability movement, I'll say one kind of thing is we reject special education and the separation of those programs in schools, and work with teachers to not see children as individuals, but to see them as living sentient beings, as mammals, and and then empowering them to work within a rights framework to make decisions and make anarchist decisions in terms of the way we define that. You don't roll up into a school and say, hey, we're going to help you become an anarchist. What would you say? This is actually an effort to decentralize democracy, to localize it, and to say essentially it's about decisions being made by those directly impacted by the decision, and that includes the more than human world. And we need to learn how to do that, because in many ways, Western industrial culture, and I heard someone say there's an anarchist and anti-capitalist approach. You know, I think we could say schools are authoritarian and they're pro-capitalist. And so we have to reimagine what our learning spaces could be like to be something different. And I think another practical thing that we're always working on is what we call the really, really free market. It's kind of a joke in terms of it's playing on free market economics, but it looks at where can we actually engage in, you know, trade and exchange through a non-monetized systems. And so that's, again, really local. So where can schools, classrooms, help map that and be sort of central points for that? So say a kid's classroom can be, the kids can be mapping what are the local skills, traits, and resources, like food, water, all those kinds of things in our area, and where the knowledge is about that. And then how can the school be sort of a community center for that kind of work in a non-monetized way? So in short, it's really working to decentralize power and localize it into diverse beings, not just the humans, right? So I think that's kind of it. It's hard to be here on the phone. Sorry, I can't be there with you all in Fort Lewis because this is really rocking group of folks.
Thank you so much. We're going to say bye
You know,
to you.
rock and roll. Yep.
But thank you to the panel. But before we applaud the panel and go to the next panel, if Jonathan or Marty had a closing statement or a thought, really short. If not, thank you so much. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody.